Hello, everyone. I hope that a lot of you were here last week and you came back to see part two of my pair of events with the Falmouth Library. So I wanted to start off so you can see me, but we're going to dive right into the actual PowerPoint presentation. It's going to be nightlife and hotels, Falmouth and the area around that. So let's go right into it. I'm going to open up my presentation and we will start from there. So this presentation is going to combine my fifth and sixth books, Cape Cod Nights and Iconic Hotels and Motels of Cape Cod. And so what we're doing is basically, for those of you that weren't here last week, I am a 12th generation Cape Codder through the Doan family that helped to settle Eastham. And I included this photo here. This is the monument to my ninth great grandfather, Deacon John Doan, who helped to settle the town of Eastham in 1644. This is in the Cove burying ground in Eastham on Route 6, if anyone's ever gone past there. And like Sue said, I am author of 6 books, all dealing with Cape Cod and the islands. The first 3 were all titled In My Footsteps. I've kind of used that title for a lot of projects. 3 books, a blog that I have, and a podcast. So after that, I jumped into a second trilogy that included historic restaurants, historic nightlife and bars, and hotels and motels. So this trilogy essentially tells you in history where Cape Codders went to eat, where they went to drink, and where they went to then sleep off the damage they did to themselves from those previous 2 things. And that was actually how I pitched it to my publisher. When I was pitching book 6, the hotels and motels, I said, this is a can't miss marketing opportunity. Eating, drinking, sleeping, it's all part of life. So Cape Cod became a vacation destination in the years after the book Cape Cod was released by Henry David Thoreau in 1865. Thoreau's connection to Cape Cod, he did 4 walking tours, basically in the years leading up to the book's release. And he is actually semi-responsible for one of the original Cape Cod hospitality spots, the Highland House in Truro. Basically, during all 4 of his walks on the Cape, he stayed with his friends, the Small family in Truro. They had the property that was surrounding Highland Lighthouse, including the golf course that's there and some of the cottages that are around there. During one of his trips walking up there, he and I think it was James Small, they talked about this farmhouse that he had there that was basically empty. And they both kind of talked about how it could make a good boarding house. Basically, that's how it started. The Highland House is now a museum, but when it first started, it was a popular hotel and eventually hotel and restaurant for about 100 years. So bringing it back around to Falmouth, in the late 19th century, that's when Cape Cod really started to cement itself as the summer destination, and a lot of summer resorts popped up. This included the Terrace Gables, which was on Grand Avenue in Falmouth Heights. So the Terrace Gables was originally known as the Draper Cottage for a man named Charles Draper, and it was a high-class resort. In 1902, it was expanded after it was renamed the Terrace Gables. The people that owned it, they also bought the nearby Menahat Hotel, which they actually used for overflow from the Terrace Gables. It got so big that they bought their competitor to use as overflow for their hotel, which was just fascinating. And that was in 1912. At its peak, it had 125 rooms, but as you'll see as we go along in this, during the 40s and 50s, it was changing times on Cape Cod. What ended up happening was in 1960, they tried to change with the times and they created this restaurant cocktail lounge called the Club 46, which it didn't really make much of a difference. The times changing with the highway, the Terrace Gables kind of went the way of a lot of hotels from that time. And it became the Brothers Four nightclub, which was Cape Cod's largest entertainment complex. You'll see that again later, but that was in 1971. And now it's condos. A lot of these places, I found that they had one of two ends. They either burned down or they were turned into condos. A lot of them in doing especially the hotels and motels book. The Hotel Adequan on the right was on Route 130 in Mashpee. That was opened by a Wampanoag Native American named Solomon Adequan. He opened it in 1840, and it was a smaller bed and breakfast type of hotel with 17 rooms. But it also, there were amenities surrounding it that made it a really fun place to visit, including going fishing at the nearby Mashpee and Wakeby ponds. And Solomon Adequan became a big deal in Mashpee in addition to his hotel. He was a selectman, he was a town treasurer, he was the first postmaster of Mashpee when it was incorporated as a town. After he died in 1895, the hotel continued on for another 60 years. Although they got into trouble in 1928, they were raided during Prohibition for illegal gambling and alcohol. They got more fame during the early days of radio when they had the Hotel Adequan Orchestra, which would be featured on station WOCB. They would actually be part of some variety shows locally. The end came, like I said, it's either condos or a fire. And in 1955, Christmas Eve, there was a fire at the Hotel Adequan that ended its reign as a hotel. It's now the site of the Mashpee Community Gardens on Route 130. So if you go by there, that's basically where it used to stand. And the rise of these resort hotels, the originals, it continued into the early part of the 20th century. On the left, the Cape Codder, not to be confused with the Cape Codder that is in Hyannis. It opened in 1900, originally known as the Sippawisset Hotel. The land that it was on, overlooking the ocean, was originally a sheep farm owned by a man named Richard Swift, 180 acres. Before it became the Cape Codder, after it was the Sippawisset Hotel, it was then the Mayflower Hotel before finally becoming the Cape Codder in 1931. It was a 4-story resort hotel. And by the late 40s, it was the largest hotel under one roof, meaning that there were no cottages. There were some hotels on the Cape that had a main building, but then also cottages and such that were seen as part of it. An example of that is the Pines in Cotuit, which was a huge complex with a main hotel, and the people that owned it would buy nearby cottages and mansions and made it all part of the Pines. But the Cape Codder was the largest under one roof. And at one point, their kitchen could seat 1,500 people a night they could serve. And it was owned later on by the Peterson family all the way up until 1988, when it was knocked down to make way for condos, which still stand. On the right, the Coonamessett Inn, which is still going strong now, but it's in a second location. So Coonamessett first opened in 1927. It was named for the pond by which it stood. And it was the original Coonamessett was based in the William Chadwick farmhouse, which was built in 1826. It became a really well-known hotel and restaurant, especially after a woman named Edna Harris took it over in 1930. So the Coonamessett was owned by William Chase, the man that also owned Great Island in Yarmouth. The Chase family still owns most of it, but Edna Harris leased it. She had already become well known by running the Megansett Tea Room in North Falmouth. And those of you that saw my presentation last week, I had a picture of the Megansett Tea Room because I couldn't find an actual picture of the hangar tea room. Edna Harris made this the place to be. And interestingly, in 1953, after more than 2 decades of this, they had politicians there, they had military officials there, they had all these, the Falmouth Playhouse was close by, so you had a lot of entertainers there. And Edna Harris was very well known and well regarded. And interestingly, in 1953, she was told that her lease on the property was not going to be renewed. And this is where her story, she became a legend in my eyes when I was researching this, because she had already done the Megansett Tea Room and she made the Coonamessett Inn the place to be. She actually also leased the Popponesset Inn and had her daughter, Hilda Coppage, run it. So she had her fingers in a lot of pies as far as Cape Cod hospitality. But what she did with the Coonamessett was legendary. So the Coonamessett was going to become a Treadway Inn, which was kind of a small chain in the 1950s. What she did, though, was Edna Harris owned the liquor license. So she bought property on Gifford Street, 311 Gifford Street, which was a home originally owned by a man named Robert Longyear. And she bought that house, had it converted, and got the license to run it as an inn. She took her liquor license with her. And then because the old Coonamessett property was going to be a Treadway Inn, she took the Coonamessett name with her and the furniture. So she basically took the Coonamessett and everything that made it great and reopened it at the spot that it's located at now. And it's just fascinating. I'm actually working on an article about Edna Harris and just her life, because it's incredible to think the stuff that she did in the early part of the 20th century. But like I said, in the early 20th century, the automobile made travel easier. Now, that was a blessing and a curse, because people that were coming down to the Cape by train, or, I mean, I guess some could come down by horse and buggy, but mostly train, they would stay in one place for many weeks, long stays at the same place. Automobiles made it where people didn't have to stay in one place for too long. So the stays became shorter, and it put a lot of pressure on these hotels and resorts to capture the imaginations and the attention of these tourists, because that's how they made their money. And another thing that came up during this early part of the 20th century was prohibition. And with the advent of the automobile, it was possible to drive to nearby dancing and entertainment complexes. And both of these were nearby in Buzzards Bay, and ironically, they were on the same street. So you could have gone to both. So the Bornhurst on the canal was at 320 Main Street, right in the shadow of the Bourne Bridge. Interestingly, its whole run was basically during Prohibition. It opened in 1920, and it was seen as a large entertainment complex. because when you can't serve alcohol, you've got to have some other ways to entertain people. So opening night at the Bornhurst was July 10th of 1920, and there was more than 2,100 people there for that event. They had basketball games, they had boxing matches. They actually, in 1922, they opened a lunchroom inside, run by a man named Fred Lutz. It was well known for its clam cakes. It was also a spot in the late 20s where young up and coming jazz musicians like Duke Ellington and Cab Calloway played at the Bornhurst. The biggest event, I suppose, at the Bornhurst was July 26, 1930, when Rudy Valley and his orchestra came and played there. The Bornhurst inside was packed. Outside, there were hundreds and hundreds of people waiting just to get a glimpse of Rudy Valley. State police had to be called to try to subdue the crowd, which eventually they did, but that was one of the last hurrahs for the Bornhurst. October 18th, 1933, a fire broke out. Eyewitnesses said it was the hottest fire they'd ever seen. And unfortunately, that it didn't end the Bornhurst, but then there was another fire 10 months later, and that was really what did it in. So in the summer of 1934, the Bornhurst burned to the ground, and sadly, it was right then when Prohibition was repealed and the Newborn Bridge was built. So it's unbelievable to think about, if it had only stuck around a few more years, what it could have done and could have been. On the right, the Blue Moon Dancing Pavilion was at 230 Main Street in Buzzards Bay. This opened in 1931. It was also a tea room. It was mainly outside. So they had a blue neon sign. Their dancing stage, where you can see all the people out here, had blue lights, a half moon shaped stage. It was perfect for summer. Funny thing was that they had midnight frolic dances, which would start at midnight. It started at 12:01 a.m. on Mondays. Once Prohibition was lifted, because liquor sales were not permitted on Sundays. So literally the minute that it was Monday, they opened up and had people out there dancing and drinking. It was mainly seen as an outdoor dancing pavilion, or some people also called it a summer dance garden. It was owned originally by a man named George Blakesley. He owned it for the first decade. It changed hands a few times before finally being bought by a man named Alex Byron in 1957. What happened there was that it became part of the larger Buzzards Bay Summer Theater Complex, which was theater in the round, essentially the same as what the Cape Cod Melody Tent is, with a stage in the middle and seats all around it. So it stayed open, I guess, through the mid 1960s, before the Blue Moon itself was closed. The property itself stayed being used by Alex Byron. It became part of the Byron's Landing restaurant until 1986. It's now a veterinarian's office. So the building is still there. The outdoor dance pavilion is not, though. And then after Prohibition, nightlife boomed. And so the casino, which someone last week had brought up, I said, you know, what better way to read from the book the actual story of the casino? So in the 21st century, the area known as Falmouth Heights has become a very popular summer destination. But in 1870, the beachfront neighborhood was born from what was then known as Great Hill. It was at that time that George Davis sold the property to the Falmouth Land and Wharf Company, which retained its rights before it ultimately fell into the hands of its president, G. Edward Smith. Over the first 50 years of the Heights' existence, land values increased more than 600%. Around the turn of the 20th century, a Falmouth icon would be born, adding serious clout to the village of the Heights. In 1901, the casino at Falmouth Heights opened on Grand Avenue, nearly opposite the Terrace Gables Hotel. The building, 80 feet long by 32 feet wide, with 184 feet of piazza, was run by Charles L. Hobson. The building was enlarged several times, eventually containing the Cottage Club, Falmouth Heights Post Office, a barber shop, and general store. The casino was completely destroyed by fire in April 1909, with Hobson immediately getting to work starting on the rebuild. The barber shop was the first to reopen just over 2 months later. The building was enlarged again in 1914 and became known as the Cottage Club rather than the club simply being a part of it. In January 1915, Charles Hobson died, and his waterfront property would be owned by his wife. In 1937, a year after her death, Hobson's son Harry purchased the casino. It was here that the biggest changes would begin. On July 19, 1939, after extensive remodeling, the casino bar at Falmouth Heights was added to the property with soon-to-be local legend Joe Moran coming down from Dinty Moore's in Boston to run the bar. Donned in a striped pullover, dungarees, and a beret, Moran gained notoriety locally as his talent for caricatures became apparent. The bartender served up the drinks his customers desired and then followed that by sketching their likeness while they drank it. Beyond caricatures, Moran had skill with the brush when it came to landscapes and watercolors. By his third season at the casino bar, his works were being showcased at local art shows and galleries on the Cape. He rightfully earned the nickname Painting Bartender. In an attempt not to focus strictly on the alcohol output, the kitchen was revamped in 1940. The establishment was open until 1 a.m. and the bar could seat 150, so it was natural to try to incorporate food to go with the drink. Hobson also tried to maintain the entertainment complex feel by adding an E.M. Lowe motion picture theater in 1941. After trouble with erosion from hurricanes in 1938 and 1944, Hobson sold the casino bar to Worcester, Massachusetts resident William McCann in 1945. From there, the bar's popularity skyrocketed, along with that of Captain Joe. McCann focused on creating a positive work environment, including putting as first priority feeding the kitchen staff. McCann also supplied room and board to his employees if it was needed. Joe Moran created a spot in the bar called Amen Corner. It was named for those patrons who drank their fill and sat in the corner to philosophize. It was here that Moran hung some of his favorite caricature sketches. The notoriety only grew when Moran was featured in the October 1943 issue of Click magazine. There he was referred to as Boston's bartender artist. The popularity of the casino bar led to the need for a staff of 27 people per shift, including 4 bartenders. The fun spot of the Heights added horseshoes in 1946, a new sun deck in 1947, and another name change occurred in 1949 when the establishment became known as the Casino by the Sea. The seasonal spot's popularity continued to grow, with 1951 being reported as its most successful year yet. Throughout the 1950s and into the 1960s, Joe Moran continued to thrill guests with his skill as both a mixologist and his artistic gifts. Summer afternoons routinely saw Captain Joe proudly shout down to the casino's private beach via megaphone during cocktail hour, "Cocktail spree, Cape Cod fish balls." Many guests heard it as cocktails free and they came running. They were disappointed. Things changed again in 1966 when William Sweeney Jr. purchased the property and gave it more of a nightclub feel, making it extremely attractive to college students and young adults during the summers of the late 1960s and 70s. The Casino by the Sea experienced another swell of popularity during the golden age of Cape Cod nightlife. However, after spending nearly the entirety of the 20th century entertaining folks at the Heights, the time came for last call. In 2000, the fading legend was purchased by developer Frank Messina. The casino property was torn down in November 2003 to make way for the upscale Casino Wharf FX. For those wondering what it might have been to have a drink with Captain Joe Marone pouring, it's possible to replicate it with a popular drink from the 1940s called the sidecar. For those of you that have never read my book, Cape Cod Nights, I put drink recipes at the end of the chapter for each spot in there. And I pick the decade that I see as when it was most popular. And so the 1940s I picked for the casino. But after Prohibition and with the rise in popularity of nightclubs and bars, there was a need for more hotels and resorts. This included the Red Horse Inn, which for those of you who were here last week, you'll remember that the Red Horse Inn started as the Bellows, and it was a tea room / lunch and dinner spot owned by a woman named Tekla Headland, opened in 1933 on Falmouth Heights Road. After Headland died in 1946, it was run as a restaurant for 2 more years. The name was changed to the Red Horse Grill and then to the Red Horse Inn, and it's been standing ever since. Popponesset Inn, as I mentioned earlier with Edna Harris, it's at 252 Shore Drive in Mashpee, right in the middle of New Seabury. In 1941, it opened as an actual resort. It was originally owned by Malcolm Chase of Great Island, who bought the property in 1929. Interestingly, before it became the luxury resort, it was leased out by a nurse named Norma Armstrong, and she ran it as a campsite where basically people that were going there, they had the money to rent rooms at these high-class resorts, but they actually preferred staying in this trailer park / campground that was affectionately known as Tent City, and it was 4,000 acres. Then in 1941, when it became the Popponesset Inn, then it took off, where it started with 10 rooms, then quickly added 15 more. As I said, Edna Harris took it over in 1947 and put her daughter, Hilda Coppage, in charge. Once New Seabury was built and finished in 1964, then it became a popular wedding destination, and it was actually owned by the Chase family until 1998. It's known for its spectacular views, fine dining, and relatively isolated location, especially back in the 40s and 50s when it first got started. And as I said, soon it was the golden age of Cape Cod nightlife. And there you see the Brothers 4, which was previously the Terrace Gables. So the Brothers 4 opened in 1971. It was 3 clubs under one roof, known as Cape Cod's largest entertainment complex. It was so big that it had sister clubs in Somerville and Nashua, New Hampshire. The Brothers 4, they were the Robat brothers, George, Russell, Stephen, and Alan. Brothers 4 is also well known for being the finish line of the Falmouth Road Race, where Falmouth Road Race creator Tommy Leonard created it when he ran from the Captain Kidd in Woods Hole to the Brothers 4, which is why it has such a unique mile distance, the Falmouth Road Race, because it was a run from one bar to another. The problem with the Brothers 4 was the zoning. where being this huge nightclub, it ran into a lot of problems with the locals that lived around there for noise and drunken disorderly behavior. Things like beat the clock happy hour didn't help. And so basically from the late 1970s up until its ending in 1987, it was a constant battle between the Robert brothers and the town of Falmouth to keep the place going. They even created the Yesterdays bar inside there. They were trying to make it more upscale, but Brothers Four was known as a really wild hangout. In 1987, it was torn down, and like I said with the terrace gables, it is now condos. But it was also the golden age of hospitality. I had mentioned the Coonamessett Inn that moved to Gifford Street. It is still well known and highly regarded for its food and its lodging. The Seacrest is at 350 Quaker Road. This one has a fascinating story also, where the Seacrest Hotel got its start as the University Players Summer Theater. And that was in 1928 it opened, and some Hollywood heavyweights got their start at this theater, including Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda. It was changed, the name was changed to the Beach Theater, and in 1936 there was a fire, naturally, because fire and condos are a running theme with these places. When it was reopened in 1937, it was named Neptune's Tryst. Then it was the Old Silver Beach Club. Then it was the Latin Quarter, which was run by a man named Lou Walters, whose daughter, Barbara Walters, is pretty well known. 1948, it was finally renamed the Seacrest after being heavily renovated. And by that point, there was 250 guests could be accommodated, with the dining room holding 350 seats. It got more of a shot in the arm with a famous owner when Red Auerbach of the Boston Celtics bought a share in it in 1963. And currently it's 264 rooms. But whether you went out to drink at a place like Smith's Old Surrey Room, which Smith's Old Surrey Room got its start as the Falmouth Bowling Alley, which was opened in 1939 by a man named Lester Crane. In July 1946, the Surrey Room was opened by Lester Crane. He saw more value in an eating and drinking establishment over a bowling alley. And the lead up to the debut of the Surrey Room on July 1st, 1946, in the Falmouth Enterprise, there were these ads that were just question marks, basically the mystery of what was coming. And it ended up being an unusual nightclub. You'd walk in there and there were actual surreys, which were forms of carriages that were located in three corners of the property inside. There was bright red trim and yellow window recesses, but they stuck a little bit of a throwback to how they started by having the bowling club lounge. In 1950, the property was sold to a man named Daniel Smith, and that's where it got the name Smith's Old Surrey Room. And there was another connection where Smith's chef was a man named Daniel Bartolome. He would go on to create Danny Kaye's, which I mentioned last week in the event. There were two big extensions to the club. They had to make it bigger and bigger because of how popular it was. And their biggest shot in the arm came when they were mentioned in the Duncan Hines Adventures in Good Eating magazine in 1961. However, now it is affordable apartments at 704 Main Street. But you could have gone to drink or sleep off a great night. And that's the Grey Gables Inn, which was at 217 President's Road. This was known as the first summer White House, and it was a home built for Grover Cleveland, and he lived there and until his basically Grover Cleveland would come and stay at the summer White House, and Joseph Jefferson, who was a famous actor of the very early motion picture days of the late 1890s, he actually played Rip Van Winkle in the 1896 version of the film. So he would come down, he would fish offshore. That's why Cleveland Ledge Lighthouse is named for him. And Gray Gables was the name basically of the railroad station where he would come in by his train. It eventually became the name of the whole village there. But once rumors got to be out there that they were going to be creating a Cape Cod canal, Cleveland decided he really didn't want to be there while all this construction was going on. So he stopped coming in 1908. And after his death, his son sold it in 1920. Basically, the entire property, because they owned more than just the actual house. The whole property was subdivided. And by 1926, there were 50 houses there. But they kept the actual Gray Gables home intact. And it became a summer resort owned by a man named John Stackpole. And they had dining, they had a cocktail lounge, it had a real nice community feel, and they even kept some Grover Cleveland artifacts in there, including his desk that he used to write at. And when Grover Cleveland's grandson came and visited, he got a tour and he was very happy with how the owners had kept it close to what his grandfather would have wanted. In 1961, a woman named Peggy Alden took over, and she was known for having children come down for outings there where they could come and stay and do the fishing and things like that to get in touch with nature. Unfortunately, December 10th, 1973, there was a suspicious fire that burned down the Gray Gables Inn. And the property actually stayed overgrown and for almost 30 years. At the turn of the 21st century, a couple came and they bought the property and they actually built an exact replica of the Gray Gables Inn, but it's a private home. I have been told that they expect people basically to come and take photos of it, so they don't mind if you don't go on the property, but if you get to the edge of their driveway, you can take photos. I have not gone and tried that yet, but that's what I've been told, that they're very warm and welcoming to people that are at least respectful of the property. But all these icons deserve to be a part of Falmouth's rich history, whether it was the casino or the Cape Cod Hotel. And naturally, I end it like I did last week with a nice throwback image of Main Street in Falmouth. And thank you all for coming back for the second presentation. And are there any questions? And I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, that was great. We do have a couple questions in the chat so far. Want to take a look? Can you see those, Chris, or want me to read them?
Let's see.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so there's one about were any of the hotels and venues integrated? If so, what years? And then also, how did World War I and World War II impact any of these venues? And did Otis impact any of these venues?
Well, interestingly, I'm not sure about integrated. I don't know anything about that specifically, but I will tell you that World War II was interesting as far as the Coonamessett, because, like I mentioned, Edna Harris was she didn't own it, she leased it, but Camp Edwards was right nearby. So she got this huge influx of military officers. It kind of grew the popularity of the Coonamessett, which made it all the more weird that the Crane family would then decline her lease in 1953. And then also, surprisingly, the breakout of World War II actually spurred on the creation of the Papaneset Inn, because what ended up happening was Norma Armstrong, the nurse, she was running the property as the kind of tourist summer camp. And then the military wanted to use it basically for training the whole property, because it was down before New Seabury and before all that, it was really isolated. And so they used it the late 1930s, but then really didn't have a need for them to be out there training when World War II happened. So then the property was not abandoned, but they were looking for something to do with it. And it's like, all right, why not use it for a hotel? So those are two I could think of.
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions or just wants to share any stories, you can unmute yourself also and just raise your hand, put your video on. So I have a question. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you've done some of the research for these books, for these places?
Sure. So the nightlife one was actually a lot of fun, because basically I asked especially my parents, I said, where did you used to go when you were younger to go out drinking and partying? And so that's how I got a lot of the initial ones. Then it was a matter of researching. The research is a lot of fun. You kind of find broad terms, nightclub, bar, and you look up what places appear a lot. And a lot of them, growing up on Cape Cod, I could pick out a lot, especially from the 80s on.
Mm-hmm.
But then the real fun came with putting out posts on social media and getting folks that may have remembered what it was like in the 50s and picking out places, and you get a lot of varying opinions on who like what places. Places like Brothers Four and Casino, those were easy. I had so many people there's a history group on Facebook for Falmouth, and I put a blast in there, and I said, where did you like to go to drink and party? And Brothers Four came up so much. It was Brothers Four and Yesterdays, and I didn't realize they were under the same roof. I thought it was a different place.
Yeah. Yeah, those are pretty active groups, definitely. So do you go into all these different groups all over the Cape, or?
Yes. So after social media, I would then reach out to historical societies. The Bourne Historical Society was very helpful with the Blue Moon Dancing Pavilion and the Bournehurst, and even places that I didn't end up using for the book, like Quintals. They would send me photos. I think Falmouth Library sent me a bunch of postcards and it was essentially just like, these places might be ones you'd be interested in. And I would look at the postcards, and then I would start researching from there. And that's where a place like Smith's Old Surrey Room came from. I didn't know it at all. And I saw a postcard of it, and I said, that looks interesting. A big carriage inside the bar. So it was, so much of this was other people helping me, because my knowledge of restaurants, hotels, and nightclubs is very limited. You're talking 1980s to now, and mainly mid Cape, because that's where I grew up. So I had to rely on a lot of people to help me put this together, these three books.
Yeah. So what made you decide you wanted to write a book like this about restaurants?
So the restaurants one was actually pitched to me. So I have a friend of mine, Bill D'Souza Mark. See, this is what I like, is I like when other people share what they know, because my knowledge is based on my research, and very few, when it came to the nightclubs, very few people had coherent memories of them. Basically what I would get was, oh yeah, it was fun, but I don't remember much because I was drunk. So like, all right, well, I can say everyone had a good time, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But the restaurant's book was pitched to me by Arcadia Publishing, and they actually wanted historic restaurants of Martha's Vineyard. And I told them, I said, I couldn't even name you 5 current restaurants, let alone 40 that used to exist. So they came back to me and said, we see you've got a deep connection to Cape Cod. Would you like to do that book? I said, all right, now you're talking. And it kind of went from there, because restaurants naturally evolved into nightclubs and bars. And then I pitched the hotels and motels to go from there.
Yeah. Oh, someone just typed something in the chat too.
Packet Landing Inn. Now, where is Packet Landing in Orleans?
Don't know.
I don't know if anyone who's there, if you went to Smith's Old Surrey Room, or, I mean, the Coonamessett is still around, and the Cape Cod. See, the hotels, I think there'd be less people in the chat that would have stayed there, because you're all basically from here. So why would you go and stay at the Seacrest? That's where the bars and nightclubs really come into play. But even then, it's like places like the Bornhurst and the Blue Moon, that's way back. We're talking the 20s and 30s. So that's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Brothers Four in the Casino, I would think you get some folks that would remember that.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to recommend these books because I have looked at a lot of these books. They're great books. So I encourage people to buy them or get them out of the library. And I'm not just saying that because he's here. It's
and the casino part that you heard, I actually read from the book. I read it word for word, which, because someone last week had brought up the casino, and I had mentioned that I would be talking about it this week, and I decided, we were talking, this is behind the scenes, that these events, people that come to them like to hear the authors read from their books. So I picked a chapter that I thought would fit. And the casino has got a great history. Captain Joe Moran, the painting bartender, I did an article about his actual life. So I do a deeper dive, and that I think is on capecod.com. I did a lot of writing for them for several years, and I stopped writing for them a few years ago because I got to the point where I wanted to write about things I wanted to write about. And so you'd have to pitch ideas to the editor, and sometimes they wouldn't be on board. So an article like Edna Harris, who ran the Coonamessett, that would be one where they might not be interested in it, but now I don't have to worry. It's a part of the In My Footsteps podcast blog that goes along with the podcast.
Yeah. Do you have any other books about Cape Cod or the islands that you have in the works, or?
Well, so I'm starting work on a photography book. Now, the thing with that is I'm waiting for contracts, I guess you would say. It's basically been approved. And so it's going to be Photographers America is the name of the series that's starting. And the Arcadia Publishing, they came to me with 3 different titles, and they said, do you want to do these? And I said, well, I can't do all 3. I'll pick one. And so I picked the photography one, and I'm waiting to get official confirmation. I've already started taking photos. It's going to be beyond just the norm. Like, I'll have a lot of places that are well known, but there's going to be some street scenes. I've got pictures I took in Provincetown at the Lobster Pot of people in line, and things to give people a feel of what the heart and soul of Cape Cod is all about, beyond just what everyone goes to as a tourist. So that's one. I've got another one that I'm working on, but it's more tight-lipped, I want to say. It's something big and exciting, but I don't have an agent. I don't have a publisher yet, but I'll just say it's true crime, and it's working hand in hand with a documentary film that's coming out. So that's one where I'm really excited about, but I have to keep it kind of hush just in case. I don't ever like to share things and then have it fall apart.
Yeah. I know that you happen to take some gorgeous scenery photos of the Cape. I know that.
Oh, thank you. I post a lot on Instagram. I believe I just passed my 10-year anniversary on Instagram, and I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,500 photos on there, which I figured out comes out to basically 1.3 photos per day for 10 years. So I like Instagram.
Yeah. So that's on the photography. Oh, and someone just said something. The casino had a life-size paper mache statue of Captain Joe that was part of the flagpole. Wow.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Captain Joe, I've seen photos of him, and he seemed like just a fascinating guy. So I had to do a whole article about him.
Yeah. If anyone does have any memories of those places that they can remember.
Yes, that's the big catch is, do you actually remember going to these places?
Yeah. Yeah. The restaurants probably more so, which was last week.
Yes, it was interesting when doing the research for the 3 books. I had a lot of help with the restaurants, a lot of help with the hotels, not as much with the nightlife because people didn't remember. But I got a lot of names of places. That was about it. No stories though.
I think people are also fond of restaurants because they grow, it's part of their childhood or their summers. They remember going to these things.
Absolutely. It's more family fun rather than nightlife where it seems like you get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely, take a look at our postcard collection on our website too, because there are a lot of great historical postcards. If you haven't seen them, if you go to falmouthpubliclibrary.org, we do have a digital page where they have a lot of these great postcards that Chris has probably seen and other.
Yes, I highly recommend it. I always joke that when it comes to obscure Cape Cod history, I always think this might only interest me, but I'll share things that I find. And that's why things like the postcard collection, I love it.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of interest in Cape Cod history because of course I work in the reference department. We get a lot of questions, a lot of those questions.
Yeah, there's random things that I'll find interesting. I was out for a run on the bike path down in Harwich last week, and there's a building called Depot Storage, and it's just a storage building. And I'd run by that hundreds of times. This time I went by there and they had, I guess, removed shingles, and it revealed this old mural that was, I guess it used to be an Ocean Spray cranberry warehouse. So now there's a painting of Ocean Spray cranberries from the 20s. What was that I just?
Wow. Oh, someone said the Falmouth Enterprise Morgue is an amazing source of photos and articles. I'm not sure what you mean by morgue. I know that there is a ton of stuff in there though.
Well, the Enterprise, I was just on the website this morning doing my research for Edna Harris.
Oh.
And I go down the rabbit holes where I'll find something else and I'll say, okay, put a pin in that. I'll go look at that later. I find that interesting. The old newspaper archives, I think, are fascinating.
Yeah, they are. And yet we do have the Enterprise. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but we have the Enterprise microfilm pretty far back.
Yeah, it's interesting to even go and just, you start by researching something you're interested in, and then you never know where it goes.
Oh, and Kim just did a link to the Joe Miron postcard in our digital Commonwealth that you guys you can click on now or you can look later.
He's a very interesting character. I wish I could have met him.
Kim is our cataloger, by the way. She works here as well, Kim DeWall. So she knows, and she puts together much of this, all of it. And so I encourage you guys to check out Chris's site, chrissetterlund.com, because there's even more on that site. Oh, morgue is
okay.
I'm okay. Good to know. Yeah, I was like, I didn't think that was a mistake, but I didn't.
Morgue, see, I should know that, but I guess I didn't.
And by the way, we do have the Enterprise digitized, but only unfortunately up to 1962. So if you want stuff from 62 to the present, you do have to go to the microfilm, sadly. We hope to have it digitized all the way up at some point, so you don't have to go through the microfilm.
Ooh, I would love that. See, I didn't want to bother you about that because I was gonna say it only goes up to like 62.
And by the way, you know, we will search the microfilm, you know, for people within reason. If they have a date and a specific thing, if they come to us and say, I think it was 82, maybe it was 83,
Yeah.
then that's a little harder. But if someone has a specific request, you know, with some kind of pinpoint of the date, we're happy to look if you can't get in here. And Kim said that he painted the mural at Captain Kidd in Woods Hole, which is pretty cool.
That would make sense. I've actually never been in the Captain Kidd, so that might be a destination.
Yeah, Chris lives in Yarmouth, by the way, so Falmouth isn't his regular spot. But he did a lot of digging to find up, you know, specific Falmouth things, because his books are about Cape Cod, but you know, he did go beyond and find some Falmouth information that isn't even in his books for these talks.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that it was relevant to you who came to actually check out this event, so that it wasn't just like, oh, there's all these places in Eastham and Provincetown, and it's like you may not have ever heard of them. I'd rather it be at least relevant to the town you're in.
Yeah,
Although,
no, that was great. That was great. All right, and just a reminder to everyone that we are recording this, and FCTV is recording it. They're going to edit it for us and make it look nice, and then I'm going to post it on our social media. And what I try to do is I'll try to email you guys all the link to it. It'll be it'll be up on YouTube, and I'll give people the link, because I know sometimes people, you know, didn't hear it well, or they got in late or something, and they want to hear the whole thing.
yeah, that I'll definitely share it all around too.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's
It'll go right on our
promotion.
Yeah, it'll go on our Falmouth YouTube page and our Falmouth Library YouTube page. And does anyone have any questions before we let Chris go? Yeah, if you think of any, shoot me an email and I can shoot him an email too. I think he has his email on his website too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I get people that contact me about places to stay. I had someone who listens to my podcast asking me where he should bring his wife for their anniversary. They're not from here. So I was pitching him places to go. I don't know where he stayed, but I kind of ran the gamut from resorts like Wauquasit down to little bed and breakfasts.
Oh, wow.
Well, the Captain David Kelly, you might remember, Sue. I'm trying to think of the name of the man. He would do spinning at Mid Cape, and he and his husband, they own that, and so I always promote him. So that's where I'm hoping they went.
Oh,
But it's
wow.
the
That's
David
great.
Kelly House in Centerville. He had his scones. Oh, I'll have to ask Kaylin. She knows his name.
Wow. Yeah. So if anyone needs a place to stay in Centerville,
Yes.
knows anyone who does. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming, and yeah, we're really glad that you came, and we want to thank Chris for coming too. That was a great presentation.
Thank you so much to everyone who came out and took some time out to listen to me talk about these books that I took a lot of pride in creating.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. And have a good night, everyone. And we will see some of you guys at the next event. And we have a thank you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.